Long ago, in the dark, unwritten pages of human history, powerful kings discovered how they could control other men by torture, magic, wars, politics, religion, and interest-taking. These elite families designed strategies and tactics to perpetuate their occult practices. Layers upon layers of secrecy have hidden these families from the profane masses. But many an author has touched upon their existence. Of the 13 bloodlines which I'm going to discuss today, one of them goes back to Babylon and are descendants from Nimrod. During the years, the occult world has remained hidden from history books. The mystery religions each had their secret councils which ruled them, and these councils governed themselves and came under the guidance of a secret supreme grand council or governing body. The mystery religions, also referred to as Mystery Babylon, in turn rule the masses and political leaders. When I first began investigating the Illuminati, a clear picture developed that the history books were doctored and that the great power was concentrated in the hands of the oligarchies around the world. But who were these powerful people? Upon very close scrutiny and having been in their midst, I found out that the elite have perpetuated their power for centuries and have worked hand in hand with other elites to control the masses. So who are these people? The answer may not be the answer that some of you would expect, because power comes in many shapes and sizes. Power also doesn't have to have high visibility to be active. In fact, due to the dark, evil nature of these bloodlines, they have traditionally tried to remain secret. The original founder of the Astor fortune was John Jacob Astor. He lived from 1763 to 1884. John Jacob Astor was born in Waldorf Duchy of Baden, which is in Germany, from a Jewish bloodline. The Jewish origins have been hidden, and quite a number of various ideas of the Astor's heritage have been put into circulation by the Astors. John Jacob Astor was a butcher. In 1784, he came to New York after a stopover in London, England, and although the story is that he came to America penniless, and that could be true, he soon joined the Masonic Lodge, and within 2 to 3 years had become the master of the Holland Lodge No. 8 in New York City. Now, the Holland Lodge is a prominent lodge in that many of its members have good connections to the Illuminati elite. An example of just one lodge, No. 8 member, is Archibald Russell, who lived from 1811 to 1871. And his father was president of quite a bit of Illuminati-affiliated organizations, in particular the Royal Society of Edinburgh. By 1788, Astor was a master of the Masonic Lodge No. 8, and this is rather interesting considering that Astor could not even speak English when he arrived in America, and supposedly was very poor. John Jacob Astor was also very famous for being a cold-hearted, antisocial man who didn't have charm or grace. I remember a story that was published about him, that when he was eating at a dinner once and his hands got dirty, he reached over to the shirt of another man and wiped his hands. That is definitely lacking in social grace. But how did he rise to such prominence in Freemasonry? It was not because of his lack of social graces. For instance, his original financial break came carrying out a series of shady and crooked real estate deals in the New York City area. A few blocks away from where I presently live is a street called Astor Place, which is a testament to his ownership of land in that area. During this time of land holding and building and property ownership, many elite families named their plots of land after the family. So Astor Place was a plot of land that was owned by Astor. And especially in New York, we have Gramercy, no, not Gramercy, Murray Hill, which was owned by the Marys. And on and on and on. There are quite a few. But anyway, back to Astor. His next break came via two men who are now known to have been in the Illuminati, and they gave him a special government privilege. Now, this is important to note because if you remember, before, and I'm not picking on Donald Trump for you Trump supporters, but just as a point of reference, before Donald Trump came into office, he requested special government privilege for his family, for his children in particular. Well, this is not a new request because way back in the 1800s, John Jacob Astor requested a special government privilege. And the two men, President Jefferson and Secretary Gallatin, who were both Illuminati members, they had an embargo on U.S. ships who were sailing with goods in 1807. But they waived this embargo for Astor. He got special permission from those two men for his ship to sail with its cargo. His ship sailed and made close to $200,000 profit in that day's money. Astor profited greatly from the War of 1812, which crippled almost all other American shippers. Astor also worked together with George Clinton, another member of the Illuminati, on land deals. Even at that period in history, British intelligence worked for the Committee of 300 and for the 13 top families. And it's interesting then that John Coleman, who had access as an intelligence agent to secret documents, discovered that the original John Jacob Astor was also a British secret agent. So talking about secrets, the 13 Illuminati families have very intimate positions within the American and British intelligence. Prior to 1817, John Jacob Astor entered into the fur trade, and he remained the biggest player in the fur trade until he got out of it in 1834. Over the years, he had managed to build up a monopoly, and how he managed to push everyone else out is a good question. My estimate of the Astors today is that they are worth about $40 billion, and one of the many foundations that the Astors created was the Vincent Astor Foundation, which is controlled from England by the Astors and has in the range of 100 million tax-exempt dollars. Remember, these are 501c3 corporations. So when you have these foundations and these different .orgs and so forth, they're not paying taxes. That's why they stick it to the rest of us, because these organizations are tax-free. The Vincent Astor Foundation has typically given to Catholic and Episcopalian needs, among other things. They also give money to agencies that are opposed to the private ownership of guns. But what's even more important is that they give money to the New York Public Library system. So imagine how much influence that gives them when the library is receiving regular help from them. A 1971 foundation directory stated that the Astor Foundation had its present emphasis on preventing juvenile delinquency. I don't trust that the Astors are helping out, especially within law enforcement. Another thing that connects them is the William Waldorf Foundation states that its purpose is the promotion of mutual understanding and the diffusion of knowledge and culture among the United States and its dominions, colonies, and countries of the British Commonwealth. Well, this sounds very similar to the public statement of purpose, or aka the mission statement that the Pilgrim Society has given out to those people who involved in the spread of the evolution theory. Now, just like the Rothschilds, the DuPonts, and the Rockefellers, the Astors always set one of their males as head of the entire family. The headship is passed down as a birthright within the different branches of the family, just as a king passes on his throne. On the corner of 33rd and 5th Avenue, which later became the site of the Empire State Building, but it was where the original Waldorf Hotel was built by William Waldorf. Now, the hotel opened in March of 1893, and it was described as the ultimate in snob appeal. But later, two Astor cousins built the Waldorf Astoria, which was a play on their last name, and it was an even taller hotel, and it opened in 1897. In 1894, John Jacob wrote a novel, A Journey in Other Worlds, where he describes a society which operates on the idea of conserving energy. Now, this was way back in the 1800s, and what are we doing now? We have basically turned into a paperless society. Everything now is done mostly on the internet. But he predicted this in the 1800s. So even back then, they were planning the world as it is today, the new world order. And it's strange how the elites, they like to promote conservation among us sheep. Colonel Jack Astor was one of the world's most powerful men, and he was among those who went down with the Titanic. Now, many sermons have been preached on the significance of the Titanic, and I'm personally beginning to feel that God laid it on the hearts of so many of his ministers to understand that the Titanic was a judgment upon the pride of the world. In the 1980s, one of the most famous criminals was a serial killer named Theodore R Bundy. Now, it's not publicly known why he killed so many innocent victims, but Ted Bundy told his girlfriend, Elizabeth Kendall, that the force caused him to kill. And Bundy's confession to her was given after his final arrest in Florida. Now, if you're wondering where I'm going with this, well, Bundy is the second of the Illuminati bloodline that I'm going to discuss here. And Bundy's confession to her was given after his final arrest in Florida, and Elizabeth wrote down his confession as he gave it to her over the phone. Ted said, "I don't have a split personality. I don't have blackouts. I remember everything I've done. Like Lake Sammamish, we went out to Farrell's for ice cream after eating hamburgers. It wasn't like I had forgotten or couldn't remember. It was just over and gone. The force wasn't pushing me anymore. I don't understand it. The force would just consume me." And this is from Elizabeth's book, The Phantom Prince, My Life with Ted Bundy. And the force is the very term that high-level Satanists use to describe the power that they believe in, which they believe can be used for either good or evil. In fact, the movie Star Wars surprisingly used this term, the force, which prior to that time had been reserved for esoteric use by Satanists and the occult. Now, this is part of the plan to take the occult and its goals and to instill it into the public's thinking, part of the brainwash. And by doing this, by achieving this goal, the conspiracy then becomes an open conspiracy with the general public promoting the drive towards witchcraft as the world religion and its one world government come into effect. Remember, they wish to create a one world religion that does not include God or the worship of God. So who was Ted Bundy and what did he do? Well, there was a great number of unknowns about Ted, and although it appears to the public that the newspapers which covered his crimes can often be very deceiving, whether or not Ted was related to the Bundy family of the hierarchy, it would not be the first time that a murderous family member was a spawn of the elite. You only need to go back to my Fred Durst video where I talk about the billionaire Durst family and how my business interactions with them, and the fact that Fred Durst came out of this billionaire family and was a murderer. And you can see, if you Google Fred Durst, the murderous shenanigans of this seed of the elite. Now, I haven't found anything concrete that ties Ted Bundy in with the elitist Bundy family, but I have found connections of Ted to the elite. So either way, there are some interesting items that would lead me to suspect that he was indeed a family member, but more likely a black sheep, that because his shenanigans became public, they have disavowed any connection to him. For starters, Bundy was a law student. One of the schools he studied at was the University of Puget Sound, which is in Washington State. And despite his poor academic performance, this was not a barrier to his political success. Remember, the elite control politics, and Ted drove all the way from Washington State to Miami, Florida, to take part in Nelson Rockefeller's 1968 campaign. He was a big Rockefeller fan. Even to this day, you find many Illuminati are connected or fans and supporters of the Rockefellers. Ted was appointed assistant chairman of Washington State Republican Central Committee. Remember that name because I'm going to mention it later. The Washington State Republican Central Committee. He was appointed assistant chairman of, and he traveled in the elite social circus circles. They were circuses as well, and was preparing for a campaign to run for state governor. In 1973, he was part of the Republican State Committee, and he had served briefly on the Seattle Crime Commission on a study of white-collar crime. For whatever reasons, whether it be elite connections or his winning personality, it's almost certain that he had a big political career in front of him as a young person if he hadn't blown it all by killing people. Now, almost all serial killers have had connections to Satanism, and in every case, the media and the police have suppressed or greatly downplayed their connections. However, you only need to go down the list of some of the most famous ones. Charles Manson was a Freemason and a Satanist, son of Sam Berkowitz. He was a Satanist. Jack the Ripper was a Freemason. And Henry Lee Lucas practiced Satanism. Now, could it be that Ted Bundy had a satanic side to him? Ironically, at the same time he was killing these women, he had joined the Mormon Church. But I doubt that his motive for joining had anything to do with sincerely serving God, considering that he continued to kill people after he secured his membership. Ted was adopted by his father, Johnny Bundy, who was a dentist in the northwest area of Washington State. The main branch of the Bundys that I'm speculating that his father may have or may not have been tied to, well, the original Bundy family came to the New World, which was what America was called, in 1635 to be Boston, Massachusetts. A few years later, they moved to Taunton, Mississippi. A large branch of the Bundys also went to Connecticut, and later a few went to New York. A group of colonial American Bundys were in North Carolina. And particular members of the Bundy family that are still prominent in the New World Order today are the ones who would have inherited the position of authority over the family if the satanic tradition had been followed. The Bundy family was an old American family that was part of the Eastern establishment, but with only a few exceptions, like Congressman Solomon Bundy in the early 19th century. His family had only come into the public's eye during the 20th century, and this family also surfaces in not so prominent places. Two of the key early Watchtower Society leaders were Bundys, and these were Walter H. Bundy, who went with Charles Taze Russell to Great Britain on his May 29 to 31, 1909 trip, and Edwin Bundy, who worked at the Bethel headquarters at the turn of the century and traveled around the U.S. for the Watchtower Society from 1906 to 1910. Eugene H. Bundy was a lawyer and a judge, and he was vice president and director of Central Trust and Savings. A lot of the elite, they control the banking. This is why you've got so many of them on the boards. He was also the director of the industrial company and a partner in Bundy and Jones. He was the chairman, executive commission of the Republican State Central Committee in 1898 and 1900. Now, this is the same committee that, remember I told you to keep that name in mind? Ted Bundy, the killer, was appointed assistant chairman in 1973. Do the math. Okay. Eugene Bundy was also a member of the Knights of Pythias, a secret society. William Putnam Bundy, Skull and Bones. Frederick McGeorge Bundy, Skull and Bones. William Putney was also once in the CIA and the editor of the CFR's Foreign Affairs in 1972. He was a member of the Permanent Steering Committee of the Bilderbergers Association, and he was the Secretary of State at one time of Far Eastern Affairs from 1964 to 1969. In 1960, however, he was the staff director of the Presidential Commission on National Goals. He was a professor at MIT from 1969 to 1971 and part of the law firm of Covington and Burling, which represents many of the elite in Washington, D.C. Then we have Edwin S. Bundy, who was a business executive and also on the board of Cornell University and the Century Association. Hezekiah Sanford Bundy was a congressman, lawyer, and Jonas Mills Bundy was the founder and editor-in-chief of the New York Evening Mail, and he was also a close friend of President Garfield. He got his law degree at Harvard, by the way. Hezekiah. Omar Bundy was a member of West Point, and General William Edgar Bundy was also the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District and a trustee at Ohio University. Now, most Americans would not recognize the Bundy family as an elite family. However, during recent history, two Bundy brothers held key positions that controlled most of the information that was fed to U.S. presidents during the Kennedy and the Johnson administrations. When Johnson took over after JFK was assassinated, McGeorge Bundy was in the key position as National Security Advisor to determine what the president did and didn't hear. His brother was in a key State Department position, and both Bundy brothers were also fraternal brothers of the Illuminati Order of Skull and Bones. Interestingly, Jonas Mills Bundy, who lived from 1835 to 1891, was a key advisor to President Grant, President Garfield, and President Arthur. McGeorge Bundy and his brother William P. Bundy have held important CFR and important Bilderberger positions, and this in and of itself should make it clear of the position and power that these two men hold. Lastly, McGeorge Bundy sat on the MJ-12, which is the Council of Wise Men that rule the United States. Moving on, the Collins family. Now, what do you think of when you think of Collins? Joan Collins? Maybe Jackie Collins. Well, Joan Collins, in particular, was a beautiful Jewish Hollywood actress from England. Her grandmother lived at Brighton, England. And Joan Collins herself mentions that her father was a Jew in her autobiography entitled Past Imperfect. Her father, Joe Collins, and his friend Lord Lugrade had an acting company. Joe Collins' father, who was Will Collins, and this was Joan's grandpa, and his wife was a can-can dancer, Henrietta Collins, and she was also an actress. Now, in the 1970s, Joan was in several horror movies, and she picked up the title Queen of Horror Films. This is also from her autobiography. In 1978, she appeared nude in The Stud, which was a book based on a book by her younger sister Jackie. Now, the fact that she appeared nude in this project could have been an induction ritual, and you're going to see where I'm going with this in a minute. It's interesting to note that Jackie Collins was married into the elite when she was only 23. She married Wallace Austin, who was a wealthy clothing manufacturer, but he was also a manic depressive and a drug addict. And following the birth of their daughter, Jackie Collins discovered that her husband was addicted to methadone, not meth, not crystal meth. And she began divorce proceedings in 1965, and in 1966, her husband committed suicide by taking an overdose of barbiturates. Joan Collins, however, was the first older woman to appear in Playboy, and you can Google that, the December 83 issue of Playboy. And it's a collector's item. She was in her 40s, and in December 1982, she was asked to be the mistress of ceremonies at Prince Albert Hall before the Queen and His Royal Highness Prince Philip. Among her many friends, she had Sammy Davis Jr. and Jane Mansfield, who were both avowed Satanists. She also hung out with Henry Kissinger. She vacationed in the winters at St. Moritz, which is an exclusive ski resort of the international set, where she hung out with Aristotle Onassis. And if you recall, Donald Trump met his first wife, Ivanka is the daughter. He met Ivana at St. Moritz on a ski slope. Now, these are all the kings within the Illuminati, and Joan spent time with Edgar Bronfman as well. The Bronfman family are the Jewish Illuminati family that runs Canada. They are also the family behind the liquor company Seagram's. Joan Collins may not or may be a part of the Illuminati Collins family, but even if she isn't, she has associated with some of the top Illuminati. She's been married several times, but obviously prefers her maiden name. Now, another famous Collins, who may or may not be connected to the Collins family, is Michael Collins, who was one of 3 astronauts on the Apollo 11. And Apollo 11 was the first officially announced visit by man to the moon. And those who have read Be Wise as Serpents, the book Be Wise as Serpents, are aware that the first flag on the moon was the Scottish Rite flag. Now, there are a number of very strange things about the flight and about what NASA has been doing. Buzz Aldrin is a Freemason. Neil Armstrong has gone into seclusion and won't talk to anyone publicly. And as Michael Collins puts it, Neil has dropped out and doesn't sell the NASA program. Carrying the Fire, which is a book by Michael Collins, on page 461, he states that the title to his book is based on Greek mythology. The god Apollo carried fire, which is what Michael felt described the Apollo 11. And I quote, he says, what our government has been doing with NASA, flying sources, and manned lunar base is beyond comprehension. But the question that naturally comes to mind is, could Michael Collins be related to the Illuminati Collins family? When he writes about himself, he says, fortunately, I have been a poor student all my life, and my parents concealed their disappointments, and they seldom pushed me. Now, it certainly would seem to me that such a student would need some type of pull to get into West Point. And Michael Collins, he also sits on the board of directors of RAND Corporation, which is a well-known Illuminati corporation which works with Tavistock Institute. He has even publicly stated that no, he did not find God when he went to the moon. Quite a few Collins have been well-to-do. The wealthiest Collins that I've discovered so far is Matthew Garrett Collins, who lived from 1874 to 1925. And Matthew Garrett Collins was an oil producer. His father was Oliver Cromwell Collins, and he was named after Oliver Cromwell, who was the early Mason who was paid off by the Amsterdam Jews to allow the Jews back into England. Matthew Garrett Collins was a Mason. MG was also, he manufactured silk, and in 10 years took the operation in 1886 from nothing to a $2 million business. He was the president of Interstate Gasoline Company. He worked with other oil men such as Governor Charles Haskell of Oklahoma, and he was the trustee for Drew Seminary. He participated in the Methodist Church. MG also was friendly with the governor of Oklahoma, and he indicated some type of connection between the Collins family and Oklahoma. And it's interesting to note that Tulsa is a major headquarters for Satanism. And there are a number of buildings that the Satanists own in Tulsa area that are used for their operations. Besides Matthew Garrett, aka MG, there have been a number of other wealthy Collins, such as Theodore Clyde Collins Jr., who's an insurance company executive, a banker, and Arthur Fletcher Collins, real estate corporation executive and head of some financial institutions, and he's also a financial analyst. Henry James Collins III was also an insurance company executive, a treasurer, and on the board of several financial organizations. J. Barclay Collins II was an oil executive, lawyer, board of director, and trustee of a hospital. Leroy Collins Jr. was a banker, director, and president of several organizations. And John Roger Collins was an aerospace executive, banker, economist, trustee, and on the board of directors and vice president of a number of organizations. Lastly, John Paul Collins was a banker, director of the Rothschilds Citicorp Research Corporation, plus trustee of a hospital, besides holding other leading positions in a number of organizations. Now, because it would take me several hours to go through the entire bloodlines, I'm going to stop here. And I'm going to do a part 2 and however many parts that I need to do in order to get this information to you. But I want to end this by saying the lambs have grown into lions, and the lions are being sent forth to speak his word in these last days and to do battle against the strongholds of the devil. We will expose their plans, reveal their wickedness and apostasies, and call for a world that has rejected the Most High to return back to Him before it is too late. Lord, this has been a strenuous task. This wickedness has been around for a very, very long time. I ask you to uncover the eyes of the world so that they can see where it is headed and avoid the pitfalls of hell before it is too late. I thank you for the wisdom and the knowledge. I thank you for the subscribers. I thank you for the ability to make the videos. I thank you for my assignment. And most of all, I thank you for the magnificence that you have done in my life, in my walk. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Long ago, in the dark unwritten pages of human history, powerful kings discovered how they could control others.